Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us for this first discussion panel of Womxn Fest. We're a Last Film Club, we're a film club based in East London, and we specialise in highlighting and showcasing the work of women and LGBTQ plus filmmakers. We have put this festival together in collaboration with Blue Fox Studios and Film Feels Connected. Thank you very, very much for their support and for allowing us to share the amazing work that queer women filmmakers are creating all over the world with you. Today we have a discussion panel with some of the newest and more exciting streaming platforms created by women for queer women and women all over the world. And we will be having a chat with Womxn Fest from Habibi Collective and Queer Men at Online Festival, and with Naomi Bennett from Lesflicks. The panel will be hosted by Vera Hems, and I will pass to her in a minute, and it will also be BSL Interpreted by Ali Gordon. You have until Sunday to watch the entire programme of the festival. You have video on demand strands curated by our programmers, and you have Q&As and discussion panels, and we hope you enjoy all of our events. We'll see you very soon, and we'll pass you now to Vera, Naomi and Womxn. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking to two creators now of online platforms and film databases that are both working to promote the work of underrepresented filmmakers, especially women. So I'm going to hand you over to them. They're going to introduce themselves, and then we will head on with the discussion. Okay. So Naomi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name's Naomi Bennett and I run Lesflicks. We are a lesbian, bisexual, queer women's video on demand platform, website and events company. We launched in 2019 and our main aim is to increase the knowledge of and the access to lesbian, bisexual, queer women's stories.
Thank you very much. And Womxn.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. My name is Womxn Tabuni. I'm an Iraqi-Irish curator and writer. In 2018, I started Habibi Collective, which is a digital archive and curatorial platform for MENA women's filmmaking. And since then, I have directed four film festivals in the region, one of them being a queer MENA film festival earlier this year.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks both for joining us today. I guess we'll start by if you could talk a little bit about the background of your platform, how you set it up, and why you decided it was needed. And we'll start with Naomi again.
Yeah, well, I mean, I used to run a lesbian women's lifestyle website, and part of that was film, and there's lots of other stuff. But over the years, I got to know filmmakers, I got to go to film festivals. And I realised I was seeing so many amazing lesbian, bisexual films at the festivals and then never hearing about them again. I talked to filmmakers and they'd say about the struggles getting their film to an audience, getting distribution. I talked to BFI Player about the lack of lesbian films, and I went to a panel at BFI Flair in London where they talked about distribution, and the first question in the Q&A was what happens when all the distributors say no. And I realised there was this problem that there's not a lack of films, but there's a lack of getting those films to the audience. And I just realised that actually there was a real opportunity because there's some amazing films out there and there's a huge audience desperate to see them. It just needed something in the middle to act as a vehicle to bring the two together. And so that was really the background. And I know the lesbian, bi, queer women's community from working with it with my website. So I was like, well, I know that side of things. I've met filmmakers, I know the films are there, so I thought, you know what, I should give this a go. I'm a big believer that you shouldn't complain about something if you can't try and fix it, and so I just was like, well, let's try and fix it. So took an idea to Flair, it got picked up, really interested, so it just kind of launched itself, and I've been chasing it ever since, and we've just been doing amazing stuff.
Thank you. And Womxn?
So I started Habibi in 2018, like I said, and that started as an Instagram account. And the reason why is because I just wanted to create some sort of like a resource or like open access resource, because there was no like at the time there was no kind of database for MENA women's filmmaking. And I grew up watching a lot of films and I used to keep a film log, and I realized looking at this film log, I was like, I'm not seeing a large part of my identity, my heritage represented in what I was watching. So yeah, I started like actively seeking out films made by women in the region, and then sharing them, and then everyone started asking, where can we see this? Where can we watch this? So that's how I started doing screenings in real life. And they happen like all over the world, in institutions and cinemas, but also in like festivals and like all sorts of settings. But what's really great is that Habibi Collective is very much like consumed by the people it's made for, which is something that I'm really proud of, because a lot of the time, like especially when you're working with like marginalized identities or underrepresented groups, it can get commodified and appropriated super easily by these like neoliberal kind of organizations. And then yeah, and so the screenings have all been sold out, like anywhere they've happened, and now I'm setting up the first independent streaming service for Middle East North African cinema. So that is, yeah, that's how it started and how it's growing.
Thank you very much. One thing I wanted to talk about, which seems to be maybe a consistent problem with these online platforms, is that we've become so accustomed to them now, and we're so expectant on content being readily available and often for free. I wondered your thoughts on making this content profitable, and how do the filmmakers benefit? How do you benefit financially from these platforms? Anyone want to go first? Naomi or Rasheen? I don't mind.
Naomi, go ahead.
I mean, this is the challenge, isn't it? The film distribution model means that very little makes it back to the filmmakers. That's something I was really aware of, and something I was really keen to change, because if you want better films, you want more films, you need to actually make sure that some of the money goes back to those filmmakers, so that they're not bankrupted by their first film and they actually have money to make a second film. Equally, at the moment, frequently lesbian, bisexual, queer women's films don't get funding because there's a belief in the industry that there's no paying audience. So this is something we really need to work on. So we charge for our platform, but we also make sure that our royalties go back to filmmakers as much as possible. And part of that's education. It's about explaining why you should pay for a film. I think, if you explain to people why that is, they do understand it. The issue around piracy generally comes down to actually either not realizing it's an illegal copy because it got sent by a friend, and we're very trusting of other queer women. We won't ask where it came from because it came from a friend, someone we trust. And then the other side of things is that it's the only copy they can get hold of is this copy. So it's about, again, that accessibility. But yeah, we're just making sure we educate about why, like explaining it's expensive to make films, and that they're made by someone who's most likely put in their own money. And so it's important to pay for that to come back. You can look at things like advertising income as well, but I think up until this year, advertising, video on demand was on the increase. I think at the moment now, with all of COVID, that's probably being revisited. The companies that were spending on advertising are going to be reducing their budgets. So for me, I'm continuing down the subscription. Subscription video on demand is a huge growing area. Most households have more than one video on demand subscription service now anyway. And all the people I talk to, they just like the fact that no longer do you have to trawl through Netflix for looking for the 10 films that have a lesbian storyline. Everything we have on our platform is what they're looking for. It's no longer like, less than 10% of the content. And so I think it's about offering exactly what the audience want. I mean, that's why Disney broke away from Netflix. They got tired of, someone goes to look for a Disney film, they get distracted by everything else. I think offering 100% what your audience wants is the way to keep them engaged.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
So the question was about like money, right? And how?
Yes, yeah, and how we keep it going, how we compete in the market.
Okay, well, for one, like what I'm doing, like no one else is doing it. There's no platform for Arab cinema, so I don't have much competition. But I think in terms of money for filmmakers, something that's really important. Like filmmakers, so I I obviously I work with film, but I work more in the art industry rather than the film industry. Like my main operations like are within art galleries and art institutions, and maybe it's different in cinemas. I don't know, but filmmakers don't get paid screening fees a lot of the time, and it's actually like it's quite a battle to get filmmakers like paid. And I think it's really important that like no matter I always offer like a flat fee for a filmmaker, no matter whether they're showing a feature or a short, or whether they're really famous or whether no one knows them. And a lot of the time I'm dealing with filmmakers from like the Sudanese countryside where they don't know how to make invoices. Like it depends where you're from in the region, and just trying to set filmmakers up from the beginning of their career to be like, look, you need to demand money because you're valuable. And other people may be saying you're not worth something, but you are. And that's the kind of thing. And I always tell filmmakers as well, like especially like public programs can be quite evil in big institutions, because a lot of the time your presence as a marginalized person is only there to tick their diversity boxes for them to take more of the funding that you should be getting. So it's just, yeah, letting filmmakers know that they're actually like they're doing institutions like these a service by being on their programs. Like you're giving them more than they're giving you, to be honest. So a lot of my earlier work was working with these places in like, I would ask for in return for being on their program, I'd ask for all my screening fees for my filmmakers were paid, and I'd have the space. And those were the kind of conditions. I always I don't charge. I've only charged for an event once with when I was collaborating with It's Freezing in LA, it was a climate migration event. But otherwise I always have my events for free, and I always have them in the evening after work. I just I just want to make it as accessible as possible. And even this I'm like I mentioned earlier before we started recording, I'm directing Iraq's first film festival, and that, like, even with that, I was trying to work through radical pedagogy of how film festivals work, because for one to enter, you need to pay a screening, an entry fee, and you need to have a certified producer, and you need to usually have a European distributor. And obviously, an Iraqi filmmaker is not going to have any of those things. So it's just trying to reassess how actually, like, in terms of like funding and payment, like you can, it's gatekeeping, it's cultural gatekeeping, and it's being really exclusive, and just trying to reassess that model in terms of like how film festivals operate, I think is really important as well.
Great, thank you very much. To continue on from this a little bit in terms of restrictions or problems that can happen with online platforms, have you come into any issues or problems with censorship or language, in terms of like none of these films are BBFC rated, I would assume, and I just wondered how you get past those obstacles. Naomi?
Yeah, I mean, so you don't need BBFC rating for video on demand platforms, so that's quite straightforward. Our challenge actually for most independent films is they're not subtitled, and particularly Spanish markets really want subtitles, even English subtitles. So we do have a bit of a challenge to get lots of films subtitled. Obviously, that's not cheap, not easy. The other challenge we have is films that are with distributors. Those distributors, it's harder to get those content because they want large numbers up front, both in terms of cash and subscribers. So you end up in a bit of a chicken and egg. The good news is loads of films aren't with distributors. They're just sitting there. And so those are really kind of easy to access. So they were challenges. There's also opportunities. For the physical screening, finding the rights to these films, who's got the rights, and then again, what they expect for a screening fee. If you have a UK distributor, they're quite reasonable. They know the going rate for a film screening. It's about £90 mg. But if you've got a US distributor, they're asking for £300-400. They just don't seem to know the local rates. So you just can't show face to face because the money expectation is just way too high. You just can't cover your costs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think I have quite a lot of problem with censorship, because well, first actually I'll talk about geo-blocking, because that's as well a big one. I have a big problem with this. It's evil. Like, geo-blocking is so evil. And they, like, recently I was doing the online premiere of a film called Scales by Shahid Amin, and it had won at, like, TIFF, Cannes, whatever, all of these things, but it was being screened. It was being screened in Abu Dhabi, and Abu Dhabi have problems with Qatar. So those, like, political problems were reflected in like films. So, like, without telling me, Abu Dhabi blocked Qatari people from watching the film. So that's, like, very common. That's something that I deal with a lot. And yeah, so trying to prevent geo-blocking. So just, like, censorship, not censorship like forced by distributors. And then there's the censorship of the government. So a lot of the films they usually have, if they're like a feature film, they will have two versions. They'll have their European open, like, version, and then they'll have their Arab version. And the Arab version is like, they cut out sex, they cut out, like, any mention of, like, to be honest, like, queerness. And I think a lot of that, when you're working with an institution and they do that, like, it's a lot of the time just protecting the filmmaker, because it's very all right for me to be like, oh no, we should not censor, but at the end of the day, you're actually putting these actors in, they could be, tortured. Like, you're dealing with quite real and violent situations. So whilst I am always like, okay, I don't want to censor this, I do have to be very mindful that I'm based in London right now. Like, I'm from a very privileged space where I can say that. And also, yeah, we did. So I did the Queer Festival, and that was completely independent. It had to be. The sponsorship I got was from the Swedish funding, but that fell through because of COVID. So I got, like, an Iran brand sponsor at last minute, and that was really, I think, I got a lot of great feedback from that, because it was very grassroots. But it was the first time that, like young queer people in the region could, like, watch this on, like, and just on, even, like, because obviously any sort of film, not even like film, any porn or anything is blocked. So just seeing, like, two men or two women kissing on screen was, like, a really big thing, and a really big thing for, like, closeted, like, queers in the region. So, but yeah, it is quite dangerous. You do receive quite a lot of death threats. You do get in a lot of trouble. But it's just trying to figure out the context, and if the context is, if it's independent, then yeah, I guess you can take those steps at your own peril. Yeah, I think I'd like to see more of that happen in the region, because I take for granted when I'm working in the UK, you can kind of do whatever you want. Not really, but pretty much. So yeah, it's very different.
Okay, thank you very much. Naomi, I wanted to ask you about Lesflicks specifically, and the feedback that you've had from women, lesbian, bisexual women that have been watching the content, and their thoughts on what you've put together.
Yeah, I mean, when we came up with the name, I was like, oh, am I going to get backlash? Because it's really hard to come up with a name that kind of encompasses. But I came to the solution that even if you're looking for, like, a bisexual film, generally you end up searching for lesbian film, because that's the kind of default search language. And we kind of went down that. It's about the film content. And interestingly, we haven't had any backlash. It's been, and the whole brand's been really well received. We've had great events. We've had really good feedback from filmmakers and the audience. They're loving the films. We've started doing, like, a top 5 viewed that we release each week, and that gets really good engagement as well. People are excited when they see a film that they've watched that's in that ranking. But yeah, no, it's there's a real kind of, like, it's actually quite sad that there's just, like, oh my god, it's amazing, there's so many films, and I'm like, this isn't even probably 20% of what's out there. and yet they're like, look how much there is, it's great. I mean, and obviously, you know, we're still growing, we're still quite new, but you know, we've got 55 shorts on there now. There's about 16 features, 7 web series, which is quite a lot. That'll keep going for a while. But yeah, the fact that, like, you know, most people haven't heard of these films. And so, you know, yeah, the feedback's that's been really good. I think liking the fact that they're the kind of more diverse stories, they're more representative of us. And again, I think that reflects on the fact that platforms that are mainstream, like Netflix, tend to show the more palatable films, or the films that show our experiences in the mainstream, so the bit above the water that you intersperse with, you know, with everyday life. Whereas with the truly independent films that aren't going on these platforms are actually the ones you want to see, where you see your day-to-day life, where you interact with other queer people. And so actually they're being really well received. So I'm really excited. And the only thing that's a challenge is people want to see those bigger films, and I'm like, we'll get there, but it's a journey. The more subscribers we have, the more people who are in our platform, the more buy-in power we have to get those bigger films. Saying that, we're just about to get Lizzie, so our first Kristen Stewart film, which, you know, I literally had someone on Twitter say, do you have any Kristen Stewart films? And my response was, no, we're just not big enough yet, but, you know, keep with us, we will. 2 weeks later, we're talking about Lizzie, and I was like, well, that was a good manifestation. What's next? So yeah.
Thank you very much. So Rasheen, I wanted to ask you about, I think you mentioned it briefly before, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about the streaming platform that you have set up, and that it was successfully crowdfunded very recently, and what your plans for that are now.
Okay, well, yeah, it hasn't happened yet. Hopefully I'll be launching it in December. I'm currently working with a team, everyone from and working within the MENA region. Yeah, so I had the idea because obviously everything moved online with COVID, including all of the screenings that I had planned. And it just, yeah, and it was really successful. And I think it was great how even though these events I was doing were free and like all of this, they were still like they were still in London, for example, or in like the US or in like Sweden or somewhere where not everyone could go, whereas online everyone can attend. So that was the first thing. And also, yeah, just realizing that there was people only had Netflix, and Netflix is really awful. And yeah, so I was like, okay, let's do this. And yeah, regarding money, because obviously it's really, I mean, I'm the only one actually technically who's part of Habibi Collective. So it's a collective, but I work with people all the time, and I work really closely with the whole network of filmmakers and blah blah blah. But it's really the reason why I've never accepted all the like hundreds of like requests for internships or anything is because I like free labor is the worst crime in the art industry, I think. So that's why it was really important for me to do a crowdfunder, so I would be able to pay the team that I'd be hiring, and also to pay screening fees, those main things, and like everything that the subscription fee will go back into that as well. So a GoFundMe was a good starter. I raised £5,000 in just over 2 weeks, and yeah, it was just through Instagram, to be honest. I just I just created it and just shared it a lot, and got other people to share it. I think like it's really probably the same as Les Films. Like it's like a super tight community. I think it is because it's people who are there who aren't necessarily not necessarily film buffs, but they're seeing themselves represented. So yeah, it's like a super tight community. So everyone like pulled in and got involved. And yeah, I think it was quite straightforward, the crowdfunding. Obviously, there will have to be like because even paying UX designers, like it's like I'll have to do lots of additional institutional funding, but that was a good start. The actual service itself is going to be obviously a small subscription fee, and then you'll be able to access like I'm thinking about 12 new releases from the region, and like in a really carefully curated program, and kind of like Mubi, where one gets added and one goes like every 2 days. And yeah, that's the plan. Hopefully, hopefully it goes well. But it is really important that it is independent and that it is grassroots because, yeah, because like I kind of touched upon earlier, there's so much politics around film in the region. It's not like a film doesn't even have to have political content. Like the film is by nature political because of the production of it, and like just trying to get a film shown is like a huge ordeal. Um, and I think it was like there was this really important quote which I always remember by Trinity Minha, the essay filmmaker. She said something like, "It's not about making films about politics; it's about making films politically." And I think that's really important to keep in mind when, yeah, when you are dealing with underrepresented films and filmmakers.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And to follow on from that, for both of you, you are obviously both working to represent underrepresented filmmakers and communities. Is there any are there any podcasts or platforms, filmmakers that you think are also representing the community you are really well? That's for both of you. Naomi?
I mean, there's lots of pockets of stuff. I think that's what I really realised though, is like even everything I was finding was quite disparate, and that's kind of the challenge. I think there's lots of US based stuff as well, but not a lot that there just doesn't seem to be much consistency, or it's not easy to find. You've got kind of like things like Lady Parts TV in the US that do like film reviews, and you've got like coming out podcasts, and there's all sorts of things that talk about films, bits and pieces. But as I say, it's all very disparate, and that's what we're hoping to bring together. And actually, as we expand, we hope to bring some of those podcasts that talk about films and stuff in as well, so that they're, again, it's about just making it really easy. If it's in one place, everything can be so much more successful. It's the power of our community coming together. Because I think that's the thing, is I think at the moment what I've noticed is we're told we're not a very big community, and therefore we don't really shout out very much. And so there's not a lot kind of that you hear about regularly. There's lots of, but like, I think in the UK we have a lot of film festivals. You've got like Fringe, BFI, Flare, Iris, Shout. So there's all these different festivals, Cine Q. But again, I feel like we could do so much more if it was kind of all brought together centrally. So we're looking at what we can do to also bring together film festivals on the platform as well, and what we can do to really bring that community in together. Because I just think, it's just a bit too disparate, which I think actually sadly reflects the lesbian bi queer community generally. We are disparate, we're not connected, we don't have spaces, and that unfortunately ripples through every aspect of our life. Which that's what we want to change, really.
Yeah, great. And Rasheen?
As far as I'm aware, there's still no other platform dedicated to women's filmmaking from the region, or women identifying filmmaking. I think there are quite a few platforms dedicated to not really platforms, but institutions like the Arab Film Media Institute and things like that. But I guess for what I do there's not really, but there is a growing awareness. Like when I think people now as well, when they think of Arab filmmakers, like women come to mind. There's like most of the great new releases right now are the ones that are getting Academy Award selections, and all of that are by women. So like from the region. So I think that is definitely something that's changing. I definitely feel like there's been some sort of momentum that women filmmakers in the past like 2-3 years have really gained cultural prominence outside, like internationally. I hope more platforms pop up, because especially with what I do, I mean, there's 22 countries in the region, all the film industries, just trying to keep tabs on each of those 22 film industries is quite like difficult. Like there's a lot of differences, and also trying to draw attention to the differences within our own community. So like the intersections between like queer identity, and also like especially focusing on the work of like Black Arabs, right? Like, people because of internalized racism, even in the Middle East, like you need to platform people who are marginalized within your own marginalized community, and make sure that everyone is, because everyone's, it's not like there's a shortage in any sort of underrepresented group. There's not a shortage of filmmakers, there's a shortage of representation. So just keeping an eye on that, I think, is really important, and having those conversations.
And if anyone is watching who's thinking that they want to take on the task of setting up something similar to what you have done, a database or a streaming platform, what tips or advice would you offer?
Well, for me, I haven't had a day off since the 23rd of March, so you need to have a lot of energy and be able to keep going. I didn't actually expect to be focusing on the platform. We similarly were focusing on face-to-face events up until March. But obviously when they all stopped, it was like, okay, well, that's not an option. We were lucky the platform was already in soft mode. We were kind of running it lightly and trying it out. So we just had to push forward. Mm-hmm. But yeah, lack of sleep is a big one. Passion. I mean, with any new business, any entrepreneur, like, it takes a lot. When you're disrupting a market, when you're changing something and trying to make it better for the right people, it's hard work. So saying that, it's also highly rewarding. I mean, extremely rewarding. But yeah, like, don't expect it to be part-time by any means. But you get out of things what you put into them. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say the exact same in terms of passion, because it's my full-time thing, and like, it's what, pays the rent and all of that as well. So it's like, you can't just like be willing to have the kind of casual interest in it. It needs to be something that you are willing to work towards and work on. And and also, like, there is a lot of work to be done in terms of archiving and streaming and like what we're doing, because I think everyone wants to be a filmmaker, but no one really kind of wants to like make the spaces and like kind of do that behind the scenes dirty stuff. So I think there's definitely, we'll welcome in some more people. And also being very aware of your subject position as well is really important. If you're doing something for like underrepresented groups, so like, if you're not Arab and you want to do something to it, if you're not queer and you want to like do something like a queer platform, like, you just need to be aware. And even if you are working in like within that group, like, you can't just focus on representation. You need to also like develop kind of politics of production and support those filmmakers behind the scenes as well. Like, it's no good just showing lesbian film. You have to like support that filmmaker and support that community and everything like behind the scenes. So yeah, it's a lot of hard work, and a lot of it doesn't get to the Instagram page or whatever, but I guess that's what's rewarding. It's building a network and building a community where you feel like you want to operate in, because it didn't exist before.
Okay, so for my last question before I let you go, what is the future for your organisation? What happens next, and what can we as audiences do to support your work?
Lesflicks is in a huge growth mode. We definitely got pushed forward by COVID, and there's been some real silver linings. We have 3 confirmed feature films, global exclusive new releases coming up, which so early in the platform's lifetime is super exciting. Like, I did not imagine that happening. So that's I've got a lot to do to make sure I do a good job with those and really get them out there. So yeah, we're growing fast. We're going to be adding more features on to the platform. The best thing the audience can do is really realize how you are a huge influencer in your community. As queer women, we trust each other more than any media, any press, businesses, anything. Understand that you have the power to help films get better exposure. When you say you love something, your friends really do trust you. If you say you hate something, they just won't watch it. So understand the power you have as an audience member in your community. And we've started using the hashtag Amplify Lesbian Film, because that's what we need to start doing, is actually, as a community, if you find a film, tell people about it. Get on your social channels and share it. If you find something you like, do tell people. It's not like it's more than enough to go around. That film is there for everyone to watch. And then the more people talk about it, the more you'll get other recommendations as well. So it's about activating our network, creating this amplification system within our network where our community understand that they really can make a difference. The more we talk about these films, the more we show how big an audience we are, and therefore the more funding can be available, the more these films will actually get distributed. So amplify the films you hear about, talk about, share Lesflicks, join us. It's a numbers game. The more of us there are, the more we can do. So
Thank you. And Rasheen?
Well, I've got this streaming service coming up, so I guess just looking at that would be subscribing to that would be great. And yeah, just following on Instagram, Habibi Collective, and just keeping tabs. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. We both, me and Natalia, who is off screen, really love what you're doing. We think they're really great platforms, and we're happy to support in any way we can, even if that's just us signing up for subscriptions, which we will. So thank you for bringing these platforms to audiences that maybe don't know the films are out there or can't find them. So I think it's really important what you're doing. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone else. If you've just watched this, you can access the films available at our festival for the next few days until Sunday UK time, probably midnight. You'll have access to them. So please do make sure you watch them. There's some really great content. And yeah, thank you for joining. Bye.